Hey everybody, I'm JJ Johnson. Welcome to the American Prepping Academy. Today we're going to talk about SHTF Intelligence. And this is kind of what we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about what is intelligence, why intelligence is important, classic intelligence collection cycle, what that looks like, the terrorist and criminal threat cycles, and we're also going to look at foreign invasion and infiltration attack cycle, as well as the the initial prepper intel cycle and a reoccurring prepper intel cycle. So the whole idea behind this course is that we're going to take a look at intelligence from the perspective of a prepper or just a normal citizen or whatever, in a situation where maybe there's been like an invasion of the homeland. Okay, so that's kind of the idea that we're thinking here. What do you need to be worried about? How do you need to be thinking about things, and what types of information might you want to be gathering? And those kind of things to have the information that you need to be able to make some decisions. So that's just a little bit for context on where we're coming at this from. Obviously this could vary greatly, but we're basically taking some traditional intel cycles and models and those kinds of things and using them to be able to discuss how you could use that information to benefit you in an SHTF situation. Okay, so what is intelligence? Intelligence is raw information. This is commonly confused. So it's raw information that is derived from multiple sources or venues that's been processed, analyzed, validated, and synthesized into actionable or usable information. Ideally, it'll allow you to gain an advantage over your adversary or provide you with information about what's happening or what will happen in the battle space or the space around you, in this example, where you live. Where could preppers get raw intelligence data? Well, there's primarily a handful of sources here, and the first one's going to be human intelligence, or in the intel community we call this HUMINT. This would be basically any human source, but for you, likely people are going to be friends, family, neighbors, business owners, employees, informants, team members, who are out conducting reconnaissance or surveillance, those kinds of things. Now, you need to be real careful when you're dealing with human intelligence. It needs to be evaluated. You need to make sure, to kind of try to get an idea and vet the information and vet the reliability of the people who are providing the information, because that becomes important later on when you're analyzing it and trying to put the full picture together. The next category here is open source intelligence. This would be maybe via the internet, primarily today. That's the big one, information found on the internet. Could also be visual observation as well. If you see some signs or some graffiti or something like that somewhere. But some common ways that you can collect open source intelligence is going to be via social media, news sites, blogs, scientific journals, research sites, and those kinds of things. Now, obviously, this kind of depends on reliability of having the internet available. But this can be, if it's there, it's a great source of information, and you definitely need to consider using it. All right, the next one is signals intelligence. This is going to be monitoring when you are monitoring unencrypted radio frequencies in order to gather information that can help you out. The next one is image intelligence, or IMINT. Information gathered from pictures. These pictures can be taken from the ground through direct observation, from high bluffs, airplanes, satellites, or even drones. And currently, one of the best places to get IMINT, or image intelligence, right now is Google Maps or Google Earth. And I would recommend getting Google images of the area that you live in ahead of time. and printing those out at different resolutions and different sections and different areas. Make sure you label them where it, where it is and all that kind of stuff, and create yourself a map book, basically, of the area that you live in. And then at later times, you can go back and you can reference those. And this is going to be particularly good for figuring out lots of different information, really, but topographical features, how much cover and concealment is in an area, if there's water sources around, all different kinds of information. But just in case the internet is not available at a later time, or if those were turned off or whatever the case may be, so it couldn't be exploited by this invading force, then it's a good idea to have that cataloged ahead of time. Okay, let's see here. Image intelligence. All right, so analysis takes place when all of the raw information is gathered together. It's vetted for validity and authenticity, and a complete picture is formed about the situation. It's important to separate what you actually know from what you think you know. Now, with this, there's primarily two types of information that you're going to be gathering. One is just ongoing situational awareness information. I just kind of want to know what's happening here, what's happening there, what's going on around me. Just good situational awareness. The next part is specifically targeted information, where you're trying to identify, say, what is this unit that has been patrolling in our area, or something to that nature. You have a specific intent on what you're trying to gather. Okay. So why is intelligence important? I touched on this a little bit, but for most preppers, collecting intelligence will be primarily to provide situational awareness of what's happening around you, so that you can make informed decisions with regard to generalized threats that are around you. But in some dire circumstances, it may also be used to help inform you about specific tactical decisions that may have to be made by you or your group. It could be used to determine the best time or location to conduct offensive actions against adversarial people in or around your AOR, or it may be used to help you know when it's time to retreat and move to a safer location. So it just really depends. But the bottom line on intelligence is that it is going to help you be more situationally aware and to be able to make informed decisions. Those are the key things. All right, so let's take a look at the classic intelligence collection cycle. So this is a cycle that happens with intelligence collectors in the military or anywhere else like that. Obviously all this information is unclassified and it was sourced from the open web. But basically you're going to start with planning and direction. Okay, and so the idea here is that you are going to try to come up with what information you need ahead of time. Okay, what do you need to know about? So for example, if we were in this invasion scenario, right, that we talked about, say China invaded the mainland United States or something, then you would want to know about the unit that is closest to your area. What is the manning? How many people are there? What vehicles and weapons do they have? What capabilities do they got? Who's in charge? Where is their base going to be set up? What areas are they patrolling? What roads do they patrol? What are their perimeters look like? This kind of information. So you want to come up with that information to start with. That way you can task the people who's gathering the information with what you're looking for. Because if they don't know what you're looking for, then they may be bringing back other information you don't need. And so that would be pointless. So the second part is collection. That's when you go ahead and you tell all the people that are going to gather this information what you're looking for, and then they go out and they try to find the information for you. Processing is when you come back. That's number 3. You come back, you take a look at everything, and you start to piece together. It's like a puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You look at it all, and you start to formulate a good picture that's answering those questions that you initially wanted. Analysis and production is this processing, analysis, and production could almost be put together in one category, because basically you're doing the similar things in here. The big difference with analysis is that you're kind of starting to assign credibilities and validity of the information. You're starting to eliminate some information that may not be necessary and or related to the specific product that you're going to produce. And with the production aspect of this is you want to be able to write a report that says, these are the answers to the questions that you initially gave me. Here's what we know for sure. Here's what's fact. And here's what we think we know. So you want to make sure to separate those two things out. Okay, and then dissemination and feedback. You disseminate it out. Maybe this might be, for example, if you had set up an information network exchange with other preppers or other groups in the area, then you would write this report up and you'd say, hey, here's what we found, and maybe every 2 weeks or every week or whatever, you guys meet in a certain location or rotating locations, whatever, and you provide them the report and they provide you yours, or theirs. And then you would have new information from them. So that would be, an example of an exchange, information exchange network. Okay, so, and then you start the whole process back over. So you say, okay, well, this is what we know now. So what are my gaps? Okay, here's my gaps. Well, those gaps become the next thing that you need to go look for, and then you start that whole process over and over again. So that is the basic intel collection cycle, and it's important to understand how to go about it, because it's not if you try to get into the finer art of intelligence collection, it is not just going out and getting a bunch of information willy-nilly. You really need to focus your efforts. You can have some general situational information about general threats and those kinds of things, but you also especially for this kind of scenario, you need to be targeted and focused on the adversary and what's going on and how you're going to best deal with that situation. Okay, so these are similar cycles, and I threw these in here because I think they're important to know in case we were ever in a situation that was more of a terrorist type environment, fighting insurgencies and that kind of thing. But it also, even in an invasion scenario, since you would be the insurgent or the guerrilla force, however you'd like to put it, then you can kind of understand the stages that you probably would also end up going through. So on the left, we have the terrorist attack cycle, and on the right, it's the criminal planning cycle, and they're basically identical. They're going to start with target selection and surveillance. They're doing that target selection through surveillance, I should say. And they're essentially identifying good targets. In the case of the criminal planning cycle, they're identifying weak targets in most cases. So then they go into the planning phase. They've identified their target, and they say, hey, all right, this is how we're going to do this. And for the terrorist side of it, then they're going to be starting to gather their weapons and those kinds of things. On the criminal side, they may continue the surveillance so they can know when you're going to be home, when you're not going to be home, those kinds of deals. The first portion of the initial criminal surveillance plan up here might just be driving through neighborhoods, looking to see what houses look good. And then the second portion here is actually starting to conduct a pattern of life where they know when you leave and go to work and all those kinds of deals. So then you move into the deployment phase where they actually get ready to go, and then they do their crime or they attack, depending on which scenario you're looking at, and then they're going to escape and then exploit it. Now for the terrorists, they're using this exploitation time to try to further their goals, to try to develop propaganda and all those kinds of things. For the criminal cycle, this is primarily where they're going to be exploiting the gains that they got from there. Maybe they're taking the stolen items and selling them for cash or whatever the case may be. Okay, so this is a cycle that I came up with for this lesson that is basically just kind of shows what happens, the stages that happen when a foreign force invades another location. So you start up at the top and you start with your invasion. And there's going to be some stuff that's done before this in regards to area studies and general intelligence collection and those kinds of things. But, preparation of the battlefield and all that. But for this purposes, I think we can start with invasion. They show up at our country and they're like, we're here, and things start to get interesting. So one of the first things they're going to want to do after that is they're going to establish a base of operations at some point, some location. Then in that area, they're going to secure the critical infrastructure. They want to keep bridges and stuff like that in place as much as possible because that's going to allow them free travel in and throughout their area of operations. It's the same thing with electrical production and food distribution, all those kinds of things. There may be some destruction of some of those items if it's sort of like the mentality, if I can't have it, then you can't either. But for the most part, they're going to want to try to keep as much of that as intact as they can. Next thing is they're going to be establishing an area of control. So you basically want to look at this as they're establishing their area of responsibility. They're probably going to be doing this through combat patrols out and around the perimeters of wherever their base of operations is. The next thing is they're going to start to do intelligence collection to identify resistance members or insurgents. After that, they'll start targeting the resistance with targeted operations specifically focused on those people who are problems. And then they're going to also, start their hearts and minds and propaganda campaign to win over the other locals. This may be a combination of things, but it could be by turning the electricity on in certain areas, providing food for people, those kinds of things, trying to get them on their side. And the next area that you're going to see here is going to be them performing reconnaissance missions in areas that are outside of their control. This is areas outside of their normal patrol zone, and they're doing this to start to prepare the next space for the next invasion to establish another base and gain more ground. So then this cycle pretty much starts all over again. And they set up another base, and then they do that whole cycle, and then they set up another base, and then at the end of this, and they're controlling more and more ground. So the reason I point this out to you guys is because it's important to understand this cycle so that you understand why conducting an area study is critical for you to know what's in your area. And I'll have a later lesson on conducting an area study because it's a pretty big project, and there's a lot of information that goes in that. But if you understand this cycle, if you understand how they're going to operate and what they're going to do, then you'll see why it's important to know the things that are contained within an area study. Okay, this is another little cycle that I came up with specifically directed towards preppers, and the idea here is taking a look at what you would need to do if you were in that situation. If you were in a situation where a foreign force had started to invade your space, your country, your whatever the case may be, then this is the cycle that you're going to need to go through to help you be able to successfully gather intelligence and be ready to go. So it starts with the area study. I just talked a little bit about this before, but it's important for you to understand and know your environment. And I mean specifically, there's specifically things that you need to know. It's not just, I've lived here 20 years, I know everything. There's additional things that you're going to want to map out, that you're going to want to have hard fixed locations on, and all this kind of stuff. So that's the main thing. That's where our starting point is. The next thing is once the area study is conducted, then you can do a vulnerability assessment. Now, the vulnerability assessment is basically taking the information that you gathered from your area study and saying what is vulnerable, what's weak, what could be targeted. Okay, and you need to do this so that you understand the likely points and places as to where this invading force would want to target. All right, that's kind of the idea behind it. Okay, and when I say an area study, just to provide a little bit of context, what I'm talking about is probably for most individuals, I'm going to say it's going to be roughly around the size of a county, right? It could be a little larger, it could be a little bit smaller, but generally speaking, you're probably going to be, somewhere in the size of an average county. And that's just a rough estimate. It really kind of depends on your situation, but just to give you some idea, we're not talking about small areas, a couple of blocks or whatever. We're talking about a bigger areas, the industry within the area, the agriculture. There's lots of different things, but it's not just a small specific thing. It's a little bit geographically a larger deal. Okay, so the next thing is threat assessment. And with the threat assessment, what you're doing is you are trying to identify what the threats are and what their capabilities are, and and then you use the vulnerability assessment with that. You marry the two together to say, this is what they'll attack. So once you have both of those done, you'll have a good idea of what the enemy looks like, what their capabilities are, and the good idea of where they're going to attack. All right, so after that, you create your intelligence requirements. Again, we talked about this a little bit. This is where your gaps are. What is it that you don't know, and what do you want to know, and what is it what you don't know. And then you're going to go ahead and recruit informants or people who can be collectors. All right, so any number of people. It could just be team members who are being tasked out to go and get this information. It could be informants who are geographically located in good places where they can see what's going on, perhaps on the enemy base, or it could be people who maybe got a job on the base there. There's a lot of different situations on what informants can be, and we'll talk more about that in later lessons. Collection of information, that's when you've tasked them, here's what I want to know, go out and find it. And then you do the assessment of the raw data, you get everything in, you start pulling it together from all the different sources. Next step, you conduct that analysis. And once you've got the analysis conducted, everything's vetted, you have a really good picture, you've written your report or come up with your final product, then you can task operational forces appropriately. Let's just say, for example, for the sake of discussion, that you were tasking it on a supply route to the enemy base, and you figured out, that every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, there's, this mission comes through here and delivers these goods. Well, then you could take that information that you derived and you could use that to develop ambush plans to disrupt that supply. Okay, so something along those lines. So then once you've conducted that operational action, then you would want to debrief the forces who were involved, see if they collected any intelligence, see what they learned about the forces, take a look, at anything that they were able to learn, and incorporate that into your next intelligence products. And so then you're going to do a reevaluation of your intelligence requirements. Okay, now that we've done this operation, here's what we've added to what we know. This is the next thing we need to know. What is it? And then you're going to retask those informants, and you can basically skip to step 6, which is collection of information. And we'll take a look at that here in the next page. So the reoccurring prepper intel cycle. So you're going to, you've got that collection of information. Then you're going to go into the assessment of raw data, analysis of available data, task them operational forces, debrief the operational forces, reevaluate the intel requirements, and start the whole thing over again. And you do this from operation to operation to operation to operation. And again, that's for specific targets, like I was saying, for specific operations. And then you can also have this just constantly going for generalized information without a specific nature. Okay, so we have taken a look at what is intelligence, why intelligence is important, the collection or the classic intelligence collection cycle, the terrorist and criminal collection cycles, the foreign invasion and infiltration attack cycle, and the intelligence prepper, I always say that, initial prepper intel cycle and reoccurring prepper intel cycle. So if you guys have any questions, you can email me at americanpreppingacademy@protonmail.com, or you can just put it in the comments down below. So guys, I certainly appreciate you watching, and please let me know if there's anything we can fill in the gaps here. This is just a basic kind of understanding of what intelligence is used for and how it can be useful for preppers in a situation like a invasion, or something along those lines. It could even just be a regular old grid down SHTF situation when you're dealing with warlords or gangs, or outlaw motorcycle gangs, or who knows what the situation would be. But you do want to make sure that you have some ideas, some information about how to go about collecting information or collecting intelligence. And so hopefully this will start you on the path of thinking about that and how you could apply this in your area. All right, guys, we'll get off here, and we'll see you on another video here shortly.